Welcome to the Ambitious Introvert podcast, created especially for introverts, empaths, and highly sensitive entrepreneurs to help you build, grow, and scale a successful, sustainable business. I'm your host, Emma-Louise Parks, business and mindset coach for ambitious introverts. After 17 years working as an air traffic controller, the ultimate fast-paced, high-stimulus, extrovert-friendly role, my mission now is to show introverts that they too can create big results and success because of who they are, not in spite of it. I focus on introvert-friendly business and marketing strategy to help you switch overwhelm for clarity, confidence, and clients. Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Ambitious Introvert podcast. I'm Emma-Louise, and I am thrilled to bring you this chat today with my friend Carly Anna. Carly and I connected on Instagram, and this is always one of those things. I'm not huge on social media. I don't spend a ton of time scrolling, but I have made some great connections over the internet over the years. And being connected with Carly is one of them that came about very randomly. I saw her on someone's story. I clicked on her profile and I really liked what I read. So I hung around and then we got chatting. We discovered we have lots in common, lots of similar values, and became friends after that. So I'm really thrilled to have her on the podcast for a number of reasons. Firstly, because we had a chance to actually chat face-to-face on Zoom rather than over voice notes on Instagram, which was a pleasure. But also because a lot of my own personal distaste with the online coaching industry is echoed by Carly, and she has actually created an entire brand called the Midas Academy, which focuses on helping coaches become truly exceptional at their craft so that any of the stuff that we see going on in the online space where coaches are overpromising and under-delivering, people not getting results, getting really burnt out with bad investments, she wants to see an end to all of that by making sure that coaches are equipped with the tools, techniques, and skills that they actually need to create change for their clients. So we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about human design because we're both quite a way into our own experiments, so expect to hear lots of that. But Carly also has a second brand called the Fulfillion, and this is really interesting because what she has seen by, having a lot of success herself online and very successful clients is that people can have that wealth and that impact, but they didn't necessarily have the fulfillment. And she truly believes that that is the magic trio and that the fulfillment piece is non-negotiable. So it's not just about the metrics, not just about talking about results, is actually feeling purely fulfilled with your life and with everything that you're doing. So both that and the Midas coach messages, I absolutely adore. I'm so thrilled to bring you this conversation with her today, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoyed recording it. Welcome. This is kind of bizarre because I feel like I know you so well from watching your stories and chatting in DMs. And now we actually get to meet, I'm going to say face-to-face, but, Zoom face-to-face.
So good to be here. I'm so excited to chat with you. And yeah, same likewise. It's just always so strange when you finally get to be face-to-face with someone that you've just heard their voice so many times. So yay, so glad to be here.
Yay. And we were saying before we hit record, like so many introverts are like, oh, social media, it's such a bind and I hate it and all of that. And, I've been in that place and I'm at a much more neutral place with it now, but it brings us gifts. It connects us with like-minded people.
Yes. And I think especially for introverts, right? I mean, like you get to stay in the comfort of your own home and be on social media. You don't have to go out and about and like mingle with people in person. You can meet people at home.
I feel like we do this thing as well because time zones, which can be awkward when we're trying to record a podcast. But for things like DMs, like when I wake up in the morning, you're online because it's like you're late in the evening. So you end up with that like, oh, our times are really aligned here.
Totally. Exactly. And you can have conversations that span days and you can think about your answers and you can be more thoughtful than when you're, in the moment in a conversation with someone. I love that about social media.
that is something that's really powerful I use Slack with clients with voice notes. So I know a lot of people used to use Voxer in the day, but that's one of the things that's so beautiful. I think that asynchronous communication. I came from a, coaching face-to-face background where it was a bit like, well, why would you do that? Because you would do things in the session. But actually, especially with my more sensitive clients, like you say, having that time to go and ponder and then come back and spread the conversation over a few days, so powerful.
So powerful. And I don't know about you, but I often find that clients will drop a question into Voxer or Telegram or whatever we're using. And before I've even seen it, because they've voiced it and they've spoken it out loud, they'll go away and think about it. And then they'll come back and be like, don't worry, I've solved it. Like, I've got my answer. And I just think that's the coolest thing. Like, you're teaching people to be super independent by processing out loud and then thinking about it. They don't need you. It's just a place for them to come in, vent almost, or at least express what they need, and then boom, it's done. I love that.
I do. I used to worry, like, does it create codependence and all of these other things that, I'm sure we'll get into, which I think used in a way without intention, it totally could. But I agree with you. I think even just making the move of vulnerability to say, hey, I need help with something is huge, because especially when so many of us are trying to do it all ourselves or figure it out ourselves. And I always encourage clients, I'm like, ask, be vulnerable, like bring the space is there for you to use.
I mean, I think that's one of the beautiful things about it, really, because more often than not, clients tend to have almost a bit of a complex about asking for help. They don't want to be seen as weak, or they don't want to put someone else out, or, from whatever conditioning they've had in their lifetime. And that's such a beautiful space for them to have just for them. That's like, you get to ask for whatever you need. And that's your playground to practice that skill of, hey, I need help with this. Can you please help me? And that in itself is so healing for so many people.
And to your point of actually just speaking it out can help. I've got a couple of self-projected projector clients, and sometimes I will check in and they go, oh, I just left you like 20 minutes of voice notes, but I listened back and I got my answer, so I've just deleted them. Thanks very much.
I love that you said that, because I actually on my self-projected and mental projector clients differently to Voxer than I do anybody else. Everybody else, I'm like, can you please try and keep your voice notes to like 3 minutes or less, try and get to the question as soon as you can, come here with an intention. And with my self-projected and my mental projector clients, I'm like, this is your soundboard. You can use this however you need, but all I ask is that you tell me which ones I do need to listen to and which ones I don't need to listen to, because that's what they need. That's the best way for them to be getting their answer. So, yeah.
I love it. And this is what, obviously, we're going to talk about human design. I think anyone listening has probably worked out that we're both quite into it by now. And this is the beauty of being able to tailor your coaching to someone's design. Now, obviously there are a lot of things that we look at with a client as to how we approach certain, how we're going to coach them and the different tools and modalities. But having that lens of human design for me has been game changing, because being able to see from day one with clients and have that understanding of them, I know that you think it's such a powerful tool as well. Has it really changed the way that you work with your clients?
The moment I discovered human design, I remember thinking, oh shit, I can't not use this. Like, I can't not. Now that it's kind of been like Pandora's box, now that I know about it, I can't not reference it. I can't not at least ask what your type is or what your authority is, because that's crucial in the way that I work with you, And it's been like Pandora's box for me. And then of course the further you look in, the more there is to find. And it feels like this never ending, but also very lovely journey of like, here are all of these tools that we can use with our clients, that it's just who they are. We don't have to guess. We can just give them exactly what they need. It's like a shortcut,
Oh, I love it. It's so true. And I know you are quite a long way along your deconditioning journey, as we were chatting about before we hit record. So what type are you, and what is your authority, and what is your profile, please?
I'm at 6'2" emotional projector.
And if I remember, you have a pretty interesting chart because you're quite defined.
I am. I have 8 centers defined. So the sacral is the only one that is not defined.
Wow. And this is the beauty of human design. I think everyone can go, oh, projector, and just presume that you're going to be very open and need to nap all the time. But there's so much nuance to it. I'm not saying you can't nap. You may nap all the time.
I love being horizontal, but I never really resonated with the not having energy, because I actually do have a fair amount of energy, because I have 3 energy centers defined, right? Root and will center, obviously not the sacral. But I never really resonated with that, like, you need to be napping all the time. But what I have found is when I'm guiding, I have a limited amount of hours in the day that I can be actually actively guiding with someone, because that is the thing that is super draining. And I do love spending time by myself, because it is just, I think the way that I've described it with other people before is like, you can't not see somebody. You see somebody and you see everything that there is to see about them. And that's quite tiring sometimes, because it does mean that you're thinking all the time about, how do I speak to this person in the way that they need to be spoken to? And, you're consistently like on, if that makes sense, when you're around other people. So yeah, that's how I kind of have experienced the energy piece to it. But of course, like you say, there are projectors with no energy centers defined, and that's completely different again,
Or I, as a generator, have 4 centers and only one of them is an energy center. So my chart's pretty open, and it's sacral, solar plexus, and then head and ajna. So I've got like a big, huge bit in the middle with like no hanging gates or anything. So there's, it's just a really different distribution of energy.
Oh my God, it's just the best. So good.
I know that when I meet people, I'm almost like, I want to look at your chart. If friends have a baby, I'm like, I need to run the chart.
They've even named their child. I have all of these charts in my genetic matrix that say TBC, because their name is not.
Well, welcome to the world, like 6-2 manifesting generator with emotional authority.
Oh my God, I love that you do that too. That's so funny.
Totally. First thing I'm like, what time was it born? Where are they?
Is that a specific time? Make sure you look at the exact moment.
Oh, brilliant. This is why social media connected us, because like, how many people in the world could you say that to? And they'd just be like, what?
Gosh. I just want to know how many listeners are listening and being like, oh, I do that too.
If you're listening to this and you do that too, please message us on Instagram so that we know we're not alone. What's been the biggest deconditioning that you have had to do? I know for me, it was the response, being a generator, because actually I used to do a lot of initiating without really realizing. And, a response is different to a reaction. So really leaning into that response along with the emotional authority, I'd say for me was the biggest, like, oh. So what did you find as a projector that was the biggest shift?
You're really putting me on the spot. Which one is the biggest? Well, I would say that probably the thing that I was deconditioning even before I knew about human design was my undefined sacral. So before I became a coach, I was a therapist and I was, training to be a psychologist. And my master's thesis was actually on occupational burnout. So I have been working with burnout since before I even had a clue that human design was a thing, or that burnout is something that projectors and obviously other non-energy types are quite susceptible to. So I think that's probably been the longest thing that I've been deconditioning. But in terms of, I would say probably also my emotional authority, and just learning to ride the wave, learning to be okay with asking people for more time. And I think more than anything else, and this is probably similar for everybody learning their authority, is actually just being okay saying no and not giving a reason, and just being like, nah, that's not right for me. And I'm really excited for when human design becomes way more mainstream and everybody knows their authority and everybody can just be like, yep, my authority said that's cool, but no, it's not right for me right now. And everyone just understands that as a reason. How cool is that going to be? It's like utopia. You're painting the picture of paradise.
I would love to be able to do that. Like if I receive an invite to something, to say, oh, I'll let you know in 3 days because I just need to ride my emotional wave.
I mean, I sometimes do with people who understand human design.
Yeah.
I will, and every time I have a new client, like inquiring, I will always say to them, Do you know your authority? Do you know what a yes feels like? Do you know what a no feels like? Run it through your authority, and I'm going to take a few days to run it through my authority as well. Yeah. So always, always, always.
So you touched briefly on what you did before you got into coaching, which obviously we're going to talk a lot about because I love what you are doing in the industry, everything that you are creating and sharing. But how did you go from that position of I'm training to be a psychologist to, I'm going to start an online coaching business?
It's funny. I've told this story a lot of times, and that's like, it's so pivotal. And I remember the moment like it was yesterday, like it was so clear to me. So I finished for a little bit of context, I finished my bachelor's of psychology, moved from New Zealand to Australia because I wanted to get experience in the field before I, went down the pathway of clinical psychology, which was always my plan. And I moved to Australia and I started working as a behaviour therapist, and I spent about 7 years in that role. And I moved into consultancy, and so I was working like in the field of psychology for a long time. And during that time, I started my master's in psychology as well, and was doing it part-time while I was working full-time. Not a good idea for a projector, just by the way. Ironically, burnt out while I was writing my thesis about burnout, and just knew that there was a pathway, a thread that I had to pull around burnout. I was like, I have to get to the bottom of this. I was just like obsessed with it. I was like a dog with a bone. Like I just wanted to know how to resolve burnout, because everybody that I could see, who had gone into psychology was burning out. And I was like, if everybody who is, who wants to help other people isn't looking after themselves, is not in a good place themselves, then how are we ever going to help anybody, So I was just obsessed with it. But I was in a job that, God, they were so good to me. Like they let me step back a few days, and it started coaching and things like that. I've jumped ahead to the story. How did I actually decide that I wanted to be a coach? And literally I came home from work one day. I didn't even know what coaching was. I don't know how. I must have been following someone online. I think I had one coach that I followed online, and I walked into the lounge and I just sat down on the couch and I said to my partner, I said, I'm going to become a coach and I'm going to start my own business. And he looked at me and he's like, what's a coach? I was like, I don't know. Just let me go and find out. He's like, how are you going to do this? I was like, well, I'm just going to do it. Okay. So I went and Googled, and I called the first coaching school that I could find, and I enrolled the next day, and I started the next day. And then 6 months later, I had my first client. 6 months after that, I left my full-time job and I was full-time as a coach. So it happened pretty quickly, and it was just out of nowhere.
I love it. I love hearing people's origin stories, because I think obviously there are, billions of ways that people could end up in the online space, but it's so fascinating because everyone's journey is so, so different. But I just love that. Like, I'm going to do this. I don't really know what it is or how, but I'm going to do it.
I wanted to work with burnout on my own watch, really, for myself, because the job that I was in wasn't going to, give me that role. And like, you know what? I can do this. Got a master's in it. I'm good.
And when was that? Just for context of time.
So that was May of 2017 that I made that first decision. Yeah. And then May 2018 was when I left my job.
And so where are we now? 2023.
Yeah. So 6 years ago, I started studying as a coach. 5 years ago was when I went full time. And that blows my mind. Like, what do you mean I've been able to run a business successfully for 5 years? How did that happen?
And when you did the coach training, you obviously went into it with a lot of knowledge of understanding of the brain and psychology and all of these things that most people don't go into coach training having a clue about, maybe read a few books. How did you find that from coming from a therapist angle and then going into the coach training and being like, oh, okay.
So thinking back to who I was at that point in time, I was a very different person. I was very much a massive people pleaser. I just wanted to be the good girl who ticked the boxes, who nodded and smiled, who did everything right. And so there were times where I sat in those trainings and I was like, in my head, I was like, where's the evidence? This actually goes against what I've learned for years in psychology. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And I sat there and I took it all because that's who I was at that point in time. And I just nodded and smiled. And I never really applied much of that to my business. Like, I trained in something that's very similar to NLP, like never used it. It just doesn't gel with the way that I do things. So yeah, it was strange going into it, having all of that background, but I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust that what I had known for years and done for years would transfer. I just assumed that coaching was this entirely other beast that I had to figure out how to do. What it did help me to do, though, was learn how to do things like structure sessions and, get my business up and running. And so I would never throw shade, and go into the coaching school for that reason, because I did get so much out of it and meet so many incredible people. But at the same time, I think that was my first experience of the coaching industry holding such a freaking low standard for what we inform our coaching with and not using evidence-based practice at all. So yeah, that was my first experience, but I was probably not brave enough to stand up and be like, sure, that's right. I'm sure it's not.
It's very interesting for me, of someone that's been connected with you, I don't know, 6 months or so maybe, to hear you say that, because I have never known you as that person that was the people pleaser and would be afraid to speak up. So it's so interesting, because that just goes to show how quickly our own growth happens, that people that we meet, quite recently wouldn't recognize us even just like 5 or 6 years ago.
Anyone that I have met in the last 5 years would not have recognized me back then. Completely different person.
But of course, all of that has led to Midas Coach, which is how we connected and how we know and love you. So tell us a little bit more about what spurred you to transition really from being an online coach to, all right, I need to start helping to make a change in the coaching industry.
Yeah, I dragged my feet for a long time. For years, my clients have asked me to teach them what I know. Always said, can you please teach me how to coach like you? And a few years ago, I kind of dipped my toes in and I did create a smaller course teaching some of it. But then I just didn't follow it at that point in time. I just didn't follow it at that point in time. That's purely all I did. And then I was actually in London last July, and I just checked into my Airbnb in Knightsbridge, and I was sitting in this, actually without even realizing it, I'd broken into one of the little private gardens. Wasn't supposed to be in there at all, but the gate was open. So I just walked on in and I just sat down and I was just journaling. I had my iPad. And I think at that point, I must have received a DM from one of my clients or someone, and they were just you have to teach this, you have to do it. And I just sat there and I was like, you know what? What am I waiting for? And do I actually see myself doing this at some point? And the answer was yes. What am I waiting for? I'm waiting until I know more. And I was like, but Carly, you know so much. And I think it had gotten to the point where I didn't really know how I was doing what I was doing. It's just so unconscious for me now. Everything that I know it's become part of my practice framework, and it's just how I work. So it was quite daunting for me to sit down and be like, how on earth do I teach this? How do I break this down? How do I take what I learned from a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in psychology, and 7 years as a therapist, and then 5 years as a coach? How do I teach that? That's a lot of everything, And so I just made a decision and went for it. I think I know right now that I responded to an invitation. I just felt that it was the right thing to do. And so I just went for it. And it has been so much bigger and so much more work than I ever thought that it would have been. And it just continues to be an immense amount of work and a huge body that I'm so excited by, but I'm just really in the trenches of it right now. Yeah, I think I've created 6 months of the Midas Coach now, and I've got another 6 to make. And even as I'm doing it, I'm there is so much more that I could be teaching. And honestly, it could be so much longer than it is. It could be 3 years and people still wouldn't have learned everything. So Anyway, I digress. But yeah, that was the story of how it came to be.
I feel like I'm going to put a disclaimer here to say you don't have to break in to somewhere to have a breakthrough. Do not go and commit a crime.
Stop that so much. You have to. So good.
But I love that was connected. And isn't that interesting? Because I think sometimes if we know what we're getting ourselves into, we wouldn't do it.
I thought I knew, and even then I was hesitant. But I would not have been doing.
So we connected when you were just launching the Midas Coach the first time. I remember it very well because I was like, oh, we need this. So, very curious about it and followed along and all of that because, I try to continue my own personal development and all of that and my business development. And I just really went, it was like a big sigh because it was like, yes, finally. So I was very happy to be connected with that and to follow along with your journey. Did you expect, obviously you knew there was a need for it, but on the flip side, there has to be the demand. There has to be the people there that go, I want to be a better coach. I want to learn this. I don't want to invest money in just marketing or ads or whatever. I want to invest in honing my skills. Was there ever any doubt in your mind about the type of person and if there was enough demand for it?
I would say, I'm a very probably overly optimistic person at the best of times. So I always kind of hope for the best. But is that question again? Did I think that there was going to be a person?
Did you think there would be enough people that went, yes, I want this. I want to invest in this?
Even think that I thought about that. It was an authority decision. It was just I don't have to really think about it logically. I know enough people have asked me about it in the past, and I announced it on my stories, like the moment that I made that decision. And I had such an influx of support, like, yes, the world needs this, the industry needs this, and I want to do that. And I think I just had the support from it from the start. But I will say that it has been a lot harder to get off the ground than I probably thought that it was going to be. People have been slower to uptake than I thought than I thought that they were going to be. And that's been really enlightening about where the industry is. Really enlightening. Yeah. So yeah, that's just something that just I think has become part of the mission now. Is what I now understand is that the majority of coaches don't even see that there is so much more that they could be learning. Their standard for how they coach is just read a few books or do a weekend NLP course or just be coached myself. The standard is unfortunately a lot lower than I thought that it was. So a lot of the mission that I'm on is really about educating now. Is actually, this is what it could be like if you have this skill set, and these are the kinds of results, and these are the kinds of experiences, and these are the kinds of, this is the level of the session that you could be demonstrating with your clients if, you had this skill set. So there's a lot more education that we're doing to really bring people along for that journey. Yeah, it's been really interesting and enlightening to launch it, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, I have loved following along and watching what you've been sharing from students, and the fact that you've now got a self-study option and all of this, which you and I have chatted a bit about that in the DMs about accessibility of programs and that balance between I want to deliver something and make sure people have the support to work through it, but that price point isn't always accessible to everyone.
That's been such a balancing act of I know that it's worth the price tag that it has on it. And if you think about what a bachelor's degree costs or a master's degree, the Midas Coach is a scratch on what you'd pay at a university. It's a scratch on what, most doctors and psychologists would probably spend in a few years on their own professional development. But it's just that really our mindset as coaches is that we spend big on business coaches and we spend big on learning how to market, and we don't invest as much on our own professional development. So that it's just shown me where the culture is in the industry. And that in itself has, I think, motivated me with the mission of like, that's the thing that I actually want to see change around. I just want to see an industry where people are like freaking excited about learning and growing. And it's a badge of honor that they wear because they're so proud of being invested in their professional development. Not like, oh, I just invested $100,000 with this coach. Like, no, I'm choosing to spend, a fraction of that being a better coach, So yeah, all in all, it's been an interesting experience, but I would not change it for the world. It's been awesome.
Something, that you say in your marketing, which is so true, about how when you hone your skills even more as a coach, your clients get better results. And when your clients get better results, they stay with you or they recommend you to other people. And I think that in the online space, there's so much on, write a great post. And people don't always talk about the networking and the referrals and the relationships and client retention and all of those things that are important. Whenever I invest in myself, whether that's learning something new or, learning more about energy is the latest investment I made. I joined a mastermind all about energy. My clients are so excited because they see me learning more and they're like, oh, yes, because they know that that's going to improve their experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just so important, like that we change that mentality around where we invest our money. And I am really starting to see the community of people who do care about that. They're really starting to gather now. I think I've noticed in the last probably month, I've really found my people. They're gathering by the dozen now. They're really paying attention. They're really excited. So we are seeing movement. We are definitely seeing movement.
It'll be interesting. We should revisit this conversation in like a year and then 2 years and see, because it's going to have exponential growth in that time.
You know what? That's a great idea. Let's do that.
Let's do that.
Really interesting just to reflect back on where it's come from. And I do think we need more stories about that in business, is that sometimes you're going to put ideas out there into the world and they don't take immediately, or they don't take like you hoped they would. But if you really believe in it and if you really have a mission behind it, that's way more important than just giving up, it's way more important than, keeping your business at the level that it was before. Because honestly, that's what happened, is that I had a business that was bringing in very consistently $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 months last year, very consistently. And then when I launched the Midas Coach, I ended up closing 2 of my masterminds, which were a huge portion of that income, because I really needed to focus. I really wanted to focus on the Midas Coach, and I just was splitting my attention too much. And my business took a hit. My income went down. It was a really interesting moment for my ego to be you could actually just go back to running those masterminds, but is that what you're here to do? I don't think I'm here to business coach. I can do it. I can do it well. My clients get great results, but is that what I'm here to do? Am I willing to let my ego be a little bit bruised maybe for a few months, having my income drop? And by all means, it hasn't dropped that much, and, it's not been a problem at all, luckily. But, it's been a very almost sobering realization that I'm in business to really make a difference. I'm not just in business to make a ton of money. And ideally those 2 things will go together, but I don't just want to be, walking away from my career as a coach in 10, 20 years time being yeah, I made a bunch of money, but what have I got to show for it? I want a legacy,
Totally. You kind of reminded me when I niched down into introverts, which was, it took me a long time because I had a lot of resistance to niching. And when I say a lot, I mean about 18 months. And then I was like, oh, no one's buying anything from me. Maybe it's because I'm not really speaking very clearly to who I help and what I do. And I knew I had to niche, but I couldn't force it. It couldn't just be this all right, let me just decide a niche. And, I sat with it and I gave it space. And then I did this little beta program for a brand strategist. It was her first group. It was an absolute bargain. And it was so insightful. She asked all these great questions. And one day, I wasn't even thinking about the questions. I was doing something else. This is always the way. And I went, oh, it's introverts, empaths, and highly sensitive entrepreneurs. And it was a full body, like, St. Croix, yes. And I changed everything immediately. I was super excited. And I never thought about the money of it. And people started messaging me. They go, "This always been your niche. This is me. Oh, this is great." All of these things. And someone said to me about a year later, they were like, "Oh, that's genius. Like, how did you choose such a profitable niche?" I went, "I didn't even think about it being genius or profitable. It dropped in and I was just like, yes, I'm passionate about this because I had struggled as that person. And I knew that I could help and support those people that were earlier in their journey. And that I didn't go, oh yeah, great, this is going to make me a killing."
I think that's such an important message though. Like, we are taught from the start, oh, you need to niche, oh, you need to blah, blah, blah. But honestly, you need a few years in business solving problems for a whole bunch of different people before you have clarity on what it is. And I see people at the start of their business struggling to niche. I see them struggling to make that decision. And I just want to be like, just be a bit more general for a while. Like,
it's okay.
Hey, like, you will get there. You don't have to be there in 5 minutes flat. It's hard, isn't it? Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but at the start, you just want to know all of the answers, don't you?
Oh, yeah. And there's that rush. For me, I felt this pressure because everyone was like, oh, I became a coach and I made 10K months from month 2. And I was like, well, this is great because I've been coaching air traffic controllers for over a decade. I've got all of this experience. This is going to be easy for me. And then I was like, oh, but I didn't realize that they were network marketers or social media managers that already had an audience, already had the skills to market. And, that's not to take anything away from them. That's great. But I didn't have that. I hadn't got a clue. So of course I wasn't going to get that same result in that time. But you're so right about this rush of, I've got to nail it down. I've got to get the niche. You've got to serve people that you're passionate about, because I'm still passionate about helping introverts 3 years later. If I'd just chosen a niche because I thought, oh, that there's a gap in the market here, I just wouldn't be enjoying my work.
God, no, absolutely not, right? I mean, that is the exact difference between an authority-led decision and a mental decision, right? Like, you followed your body. That's perfect.
Yeah, in the middle of a pandemic.
Oh, shit.
So there are many mental decisions that could have been made about what could potentially be more profitable at that point. But yeah.
Oh my God, what a time.
Yeah. So moving on slightly, obviously I'm going to drop all the details about Midas Coach in the show notes so everyone can learn more about that. But for those listeners that are not coaches, let's talk about fulfillment.
Okay.
Because this is I mean, if I think of you, I think human design, Midas Coach, fulfillment. That's your legacy to me.
Oh, I love that. I'm very happy to be that legacy for you.
Because I think fulfillment is such an interesting word, interesting in a good way, but interesting because it's not success and it's not happiness and it's not achievement. And it kind of, I see like a little Venn diagram where that can all kind of overlap, but that fulfillment is a very different feeling in and of itself.
It's so different. And I've honestly spent the last, how many years? Around 4 years, trying to conceptualize what fulfillment is. And so like fulfillment first dropped into my awareness as something that I was like supposed to do, so to speak, in a psychic reading. And this person said to me, you're here to bring fulfillment to the masses. And I just went, what on earth does that mean? But it just stuck with me. It stuck with me. I should actually go and find that notebook. Got it somewhere. I've actually got it like transcribed what they said. I should find about it. So it's stuck with me since then, because exact same thing. I knew it in my body as soon as they said it. I was like, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. And I've spent the last few years just obviously working on this, on myself, on this search and on this pathway. Like, what is fulfillment? What does that look like for me? What does it feel like for me when I am fulfilled? Is there a code behind it? How do I help other people do this? And of course, like, I have been business coaching for that entire time, but really what I started getting known for was the business coach that was here to actually help you with your lifestyle fulfillment, like building a business that actually allows you to live the lifestyle that you want to lead, building a business that's in alignment with your values. So it was always very much business coaching from the lens of fulfillment. And I still don't know that I know exactly what fulfillment is for everybody, because I think that it's different for everybody. I don't think there is a code. I think that there are certain things that help. I think that there are certain things that, help bring us closer. But I've fallen in love with the fact that there is no code. I've fallen in love with the fact that it's actually a journey of unbecoming. And I think that's where human design lends itself so beautifully as a tool for fulfillment, is that it's looking at all of the places in your life where you are trying to be someone and live a life that is not you, that is not yours, and going on this pathway of just being so hyper critical of any decision that is not right for you, any decision that is not from who you are. It's from a should, it's from conditioning, it's from I'm supposed to do it that way. And I think if I were to boil down the process of fulfillment, I think that's what it is. It's the process of learning to do life your way, and the process of learning to love yourself as who you are naturally. So yeah, and there's another thing that I've told myself for ages. Oh, you need to know exactly how to create fulfillment before you can really bring this to other people. But, and I think this is my 2-line coming out, right? Like 6'2", like I don't know how I do a lot of the stuff that I do. But when I really sit down and start formulating it, I actually do know. I do know. And I just tell myself that I don't. So yeah, fulfillment. And this just happened last week. Actually, I separated out my brands. So I now have 2 brands. I have the Midas Academy, which is what houses everything that we do for coaches. So professional development for coaches. And then I also have the Fulfillion. So the Fulfillionaire has a podcast, it has a membership, and now it also has its own Instagram too. So I'm really excited now that those 2 brands are separated out, because it really just gives me that clarity of like, these are the 2 things that I do, and they don't have to necessarily fit together all of the time, because that's what I was trying to do, is like, how do I fit them into one brand? But actually they're separate, and I get to have 2 businesses which kind of feed each other, which is really fulfilling for me.
But then you touched on before, like with this not rush into niche and not having all the answers straight away. And something that I really love that I've observed just from, our interaction and watching your stories is you will own the spaciousness and not feel like you have to make a decision straight away and do something because, you said before, you're like, oh, I'm just sitting with something and I'm going to see what comes up. Or you'll be like, oh, I've made a decision and the decision's made, but it doesn't feel like the right time to announce it yet. And that always feels like it's this intentional spaciousness and no rush. And I think that to me is great, because I'm highly sensitive and I don't like following people that are in this manic energy of, like changing things every 2 seconds. And I appreciate that in you, because I think it's missing, and that people do feel like they should know everything and have all the answers and go and take action straight away. And it's actually there's almost like a calm confidence, I'm going to say, in being able to go, yeah, I'm just going to sit this out. And like, I know I need to separate my brands out at some point. I'm just going to sit with it and see how it feels and when's the right time to do it.
Thank you for reflecting that back. I actually didn't realize that was what I did so much, but you're totally right. I do share a lot of that on my stories, my decision-making process. And that's really important, for the way that I run my business and for the way that I live my life. I do sit on things for some time, even though I know things are right, I do sit with them. And again, that's been one of those learnings with the emotional authority, right? Is like, just sit with it, just be with the idea for a little while. And I think that's really important for just collectively regulating our nervous systems, because we are so used to, exactly like you say, seeing people chop and change and switch and move. And like, that might be right for some people, but it's not right for the majority of us. Like, we need time to rest. We need time to regulate. We need time to just be. And I like that I get to be a model for that, because it is how I live my life. So I'm glad that that's, come through.
Absolutely. I think it can get a bad rep that if we're not taking action or doing something straight away, that we've got a quote unquote mindset block, or we're procrastinating, or any of these that, like, why aren't you doing the thing? Why aren't you taking action? And actually, not everyone's like that. Some people are. Some people just go straight off and do the thing, and that works for them. But I like things to be a bit more considered. And I try to get this through to clients. Sometimes it's because they feel like, oh, I'm getting behind or I'm not getting there fast enough. And it's like, when you look back, if it took you 2 months longer to do something, when you look back in 3 years' time, that 2 months will be nothing.
Right. And this is why I hate when people talk about, when they have it in their Instagram bio, oh, I did 100K in my first 3 months. Like that might feel really good for you to speak about in your bio, like as a way to get people to trust you. But think about the underlying impact that has on people. It collectively creates a rushing. It collectively creates I'm ahead of you and you're behind me. And I think, and this is where I drive myself a little bit crazy sometimes, is I do think about, probably a little bit too critically, the impact that what I say and how that comes across and the impact that has on the collective. And I know we're not responsible for how everybody responds to us, but I think we can be a little bit more responsible for sending out a message that supports people rather than something that's just here for our ego, which is why I stopped thinking about my income months ago. And now I'm kind of like venturing back into like mentioning it occasionally because I've done a lot of my own deconditioning around talking about money. And I do have a defined ego. There is actually a correctness in me talking about it in some respect, but I've had to go through that pathway of like, when am I doing it for me versus when am I doing it to help somebody else, you know? So that's been a journey as well. But you can always tell when people are just like doing it for their own ego, you know? And I don't like that.
I think that's what we actually first, when you were talking, I was like, that's what we first connected about. I think I responded to a post where you talked about not sharing your income because I stopped sharing my income as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I did post that probably about 8 months ago when I first launched the Midas Coach. I think you're right.
That's probably it then. For me, a lot of my clients earn more than me. They're not hiring me because of what I've earned. They're hiring me because my skills have been able to hold space and coach them.
Yes.
And so it doesn't matter in that respect. But also, I think I said to you then, I found that I tried it because I had a coach and she was like, oh, share when you've had a big month. And, and I do understand the credibility marker of it, especially when I was earlier in business. Like now people can see I've been around a while and I've got a lot of clients. And I'm like, that's the credibility. But whenever I shared it, I just got inquiries from people and I felt like it was for the wrong reason because they wanted me to like show them how to have a 20K month or something. I'm like, no, it's not what I'm here for.
Like we will probably get there, but like that's not, it's not the point. Like that's not the reason that we're in business. And I'm obsessed with the fact that rhetoric is changing. It has changed so much in the last 6 months. And in fact, I think most people are actually turned off when they hear about people's big money wins and things like that now because they can sense that it's coming from a place of trying to show off for the wrong reasons. That's great that it's changing.
Context as well. I love when someone shares their revenue and it's broken down and it's almost like this came from this and this came from this and my tax bill was this and I spent this on ads because I think it just goes to show, I certainly came into the online space thinking when everyone was talking about 10K months, they were talking about a salary. And then I realized like, oh, if I had, I was in a full-time, well-paid job and I was like, oh, if I had a 10K month and I had to pay tax and a team and everything, I'd be taking a pay cut.
Exactly. But that's the whole piece about intention, right? Like what is the purpose of sharing about your income? Is the purpose to break it down and to educate and like, this is how much I spent on this and this is what it actually costs to run, a 7-figure business or whatever it is. Like, the intention is education versus the intention being ego, unhealthy ego.
I agree. I think it's changing significantly, which is great to see. And gosh, I haven't done market research for a while. It's probably been a little over a year, but that was one of the things that came back. I had about 40 responses and a lot of them were, I'm just sick of just the money talk for money's sake.
Right. Exactly. 100%. And I think we have to be careful not to go too far in the other direction of like, then going back to, I don't want the money or like, I'm not focused on the money because we are running businesses, it is important to focus on money. It is important to focus on profit. It is important to focus on your money mindset and do, all of these things. And we have to be careful that we don't villainize things like luxury because, the luxury mentors are getting a bad rap right now. Like, we have to be careful that we don't do that, because then it just becomes, women bringing other women down for making money. And that's not what we want either. We want to have this like beautiful, healthy balance of like, yeah, we make great money and we also don't have to share about it from the perspective of making ourselves feel good. We can share it from a place of like, I get to be inspirational and I get to show you that this is possible for you. And if you want to fly first class, and if you want to have a luxury car, and if you want to have a beautiful home, like, you get to have all of that, and it doesn't define you, and it's not what your brand is. You are the brand. It's just part of it,
Totally. And that's why I love the fulfillment piece, because like you say, some people would just go, I don't care about flying first class. Like, I'm happy sitting in economy. That's fine. But they might want a super duper fancy car because they go, well, I spend like hours each week in the car. I don't spend long on a plane. Someone else might be like, I want to fly first class because that's like a childhood dream. And now I've created this business that enables me to do that. To me, that's that intentional fulfillment, like you're talking about, not like, let me tick this off the bucket list so I can share it with other people, but like, this means something to me and I enjoy it.
Absolutely. Like, that's just it. Like, and the question that I always ask clients is like, if you were alone and nobody could see you doing it, would you still want it? If you couldn't post about it on social media, would you still want it? And if the answer to that is yes, you can go for it. But if you're just doing it because of how you think you're going to be perceived, it's probably not going to make you happy, because you actually won't be present and enjoy it for the sake of enjoying it. You'll be like, oh, I wonder what someone is thinking, or I wonder how I can turn this into a post. Like, no, like, let's be present in those things and actually relish in them. And I actually shared far less about the luxury pieces of my life now. I forget to do it because it's so much become not about, my ego. It hasn't become, it's not about that anymore. It's actually just because that's how I want to live my life. And occasionally I share about it. People are like, oh, that's like, that's amazing. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool. You're inspired by that. Maybe I should share a little bit more about it, So it is discretionary. It's intentional. That's what we have to learn how to do. That is part of the pathway to fulfillment for sure.
That was one of the biggest things for me when I started this journey, is being encouraged by marketing coaches to share more of my life, because I didn't have personal accounts. So I opened the accounts for the business. And so it didn't come naturally to me to do it whatsoever. And honestly, half the time when I go out, I don't even take a phone. So yeah. if I go out for coffee, and then they'd be like, oh, we'll share when you went out for coffee. And I'm like, oh, well, I didn't take a phone. So then I'd start taking the phone. And then it would be this whole like, oh, I need to take a picture before I start eating or what. And I'm like, no, I'm not like, I'll grow my business more slowly because I'm not available for this. I switch my phone off at the weekends as well. I have a tech detox. I switch it off. So anything that I'm doing at the weekends never gets documented. So I'm like, well, what's the point?
I freaking love that. And I mean, I guess like that's the cool thing, is that actually that would be the cool thing to share. It's like, here's a blank screen, because I turn my phone off at the weekend, because that's what fulfillment is for me. Like giving people permission to do it their way. That's what I love social media for, is like the things that are so mundane to you, that are the way that you have given yourself permission to live your life, are going to be hyper, super amazingly like inspirational to somebody else, and permission giving to do it your way.
Yeah, because they will have been told the same thing as me. It doesn't feel good, doesn't sit well with them. And then you see someone else doing it differently and it's like, oh, thank you.
I mean, I posted a reel yesterday or the day before, because I'd had this conversation with a student of mine in the Midas course. She reached out to me and she sent me a voice note, and she was like, I just wanted to say that, I was just watching one of your videos, and she's like, you don't have your hair done. You're not wearing like a full face of makeup. You're like in your comfy clothes and you're having a cup of tea, and it just feels like I'm sitting down having a chat with you and having a cup of tea with you. She's like, it's so refreshing. And that was really interesting for me, because that's who I am all the time. Like, you can see me right now. I'm wearing a hoodie. Like, I was just drinking a cup of coffee before. Like, it's how I show up. But every time I show up that way, there is always that voice in my head that says, oh, you should probably put some makeup on, or oh, you should probably do your hair, or oh, you blah, 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 whatever, whatever. You know, I've had this voice in my head that's like, one day when Midas Coach is fully recorded, I'm going to re-record the entire thing with professional lighting and professional filming. And like, when she sent me that message, I was like, oh, that's not what people want from me. They don't want to see that side of me because that's not who I am. And there are people who are like that, and that's awesome. That's perfect because that's who they are. That's not who I am. So all of these little things that we judge ourselves for being less than are actually exactly what people want to see from us, because it's inspiring, because we're doing them our way. And I think that's been a huge lesson along my journey, is like, just be you. Give yourself permission to do it your way. And it's pretty special.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the things that I wanted to reference in this as well, because I feel exactly the same as I'm sat here in, you know, comfy clothes with no makeup. I rarely wear makeup at the best of times. So, but it does cross my mind. And like I say, I was off social media. I didn't have Facebook or anything until my late 30s. And then I came on there for business, and there are a lot of really young and glamorous people. And I was like, oh, I don't look like these people, and I'm not, you know, I don't want to use filters, but I equally don't want to put makeup on every day, because that's just not who I am. And even in my brand pictures, I'm wearing the clothes that I wear like at home. If you look at my brand pictures, like sometimes my clients will go, I've seen that top in picture. I'm like, yeah, it's just like a sweater from Lululemon or something, because I really felt this. I didn't want there to be a disconnect. I didn't want people to see me online and then turn up to a call and go, oh, it's like a different person. I wanted it to just be me. Yes, like I've got some makeup on and someone's done my hair looking a bit nicer in the brand pictures, but I still wanted it to look like me.
Fully. I think that's really important, right? It's, God, isn't business just one big unlearning? Like, it's, you just thrown in the fire of figuring out who you are. And you better bloody well do it pretty quickly.
Yeah. And once you know it, then you've got to decide, can I own who I am? Am I okay with who I am? Or am I going to try and hide that? Or like you say, let the ego take over? There's just, I've never had kids, so I can't speak for that journey. But I think the journey of starting your business, nothing will open you up and reflect things back to you in the same way. The personal growth, whether you're ready for it or not, it's coming for you.
Well, if there were one secret to success, I think would be it, is to lean into the personal growth. Like, all of your demons, all of your shadows, all of the hard parts of yourself are always going to come to the surface. And the closer you examine them, the more you lean into them, that's going to lead you down that pathway of success. But more than that, fulfillment.
And I think that's a perfect word to wrap up on, because it kind of encapsulates everything we have discussed. I could chat to you forever, but it's actually almost 10 p.m. here. And that shows how much I like you, that I'm on a device at almost 10 p.m. But before I let you go, obviously, I'm going to ask you the same questions that I ask all of my guests. You've opted not to know them, so here's the moment of truth. Firstly, if you could recommend any book to my audience of ambitious introverts who are looking to grow their business, which book would you suggest to them?
Get my bookcase right now. I'll get it for you so you can see it.
Amazing.
So I'm sharing this not because I think it's going to help an ambitious introvert grow their business, so to speak, but it is very much on brand. And it was the book that fully started my pathway down the idea of thinking, I wonder if I can do it my way. So it's this book here, and it's called The Crossroads of Should and Must. Have you seen this book before?
I love this book, and I don't think I've ever met anyone else that's read it. It's a wonderful book.
It's so beautiful. Have you got this copy that's all like painted?
No, I have it on the Kindle.
Oh my Lord. So I found this in a bookshop in 2015 when I was at the height of like one of my burnout episodes. And I was just like, there's got to be a different life. There's got to be something other than working 40 hours a week, 48 weeks of the year for another 40 years of my life to then get freedom. And that was the book that I then walked into the bookshop and found. So, I mean, maybe it's not going to be groundbreaking for anybody who's already in their business, I think, but I love it because it's so pretty. So if you can get your hands on a physical copy of it, because it's all watercolor painted and it's just gorgeous. I love it so much.
I love that. I'm going to pop the link to it in the show notes. I will try to find a printed copy of it and link to that as well in case anyone wants to buy it. And lastly, what would you say of all of the beliefs that you've had to either change slightly or new beliefs that you've had to adopt? What's the biggest one that's enabled you to be as successful and fulfilled as you are today?
Something along the lines of everything is always working, everything always works, and you get to choose the one that feels best for you. You get to choose the way that feels best for you. It's all going to lead down to the thing that you want. But if you don't choose the pathway that feels best for you, that pathway itself won't be fulfilling. You've got to choose the one that is right for you. That would be it.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you for sharing your wisdom on this very random conversation. I know we covered so many things, but I appreciate you. It's so great to finally chat to you. I'm going to pop all of your links to all of the places that people can find you in the show notes. And yeah, let's catch up in a year and see if you've changed the industry.
Let's do it. Oh my God, I can't wait. This has been so much fun. You're an absolute gem. And there's not many people that I would get up at 7 o'clock in the morning for to talk to. So
mutual appreciation here with pushing our bedtime boundaries. So thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Lots of love.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Ambitious Introvert podcast with me, Emma-Louise Parks. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on iTunes. As a thank you, one lucky reviewer each month will win a 60-minute one-on-one coaching session with me, where you'll get the clarity and confidence to attract your ideal clients. And if you know someone who could benefit from listening to the show, then please do share and help me reach as many fellow ambitious introverts as possible.